Heritage of Faith collection. Now, I'm going to be using a Mac computer for tonight's presentation. However, I did a slight recording or a very quick recording on some of the things that are different on a Windows computer, and I'd like to play that for you now so that those of you that have a Windows computer can understand sort of the differences between the two running accordance. So here is this quick video on a few things that you need to know if you're running on a Windows machine.
If you're using a Windows machine, you're going to see that there are a few things that are different on it running accordance than on the Mac. So I wanted to show you the main things right up front. First, your toolbar. Your toolbar looks like this, and to customize it, you can right-click on the toolbar, and from here you can customize it, or you can add text to the icons themselves. To customize the toolbar, you select it, and from here, anything that's not shown on the toolbar will be in the left-hand window, and you can add it on the toolbar. Then, once it's in the right window, you can select where you want it to appear. You can move it up, or you can move it down on the window, and it will correspondingly move positions on the toolbar. So that is how you can customize your toolbar. Now, you can also add text to your icons. This takes up more space, but it allows you to see what those icons do. And maybe when you first start off, have fewer icons that are most important along with what they do. The next thing is, on a Windows machine, easy install and check for updates is found underneath Utilities. Simply click on Utilities, and you can see where you can get to easy install, check for updates. You can also synchronize with mobile devices and other computers. Now, if you wanted to set settings and preferences specifically for the Accordance program, you would go to Edit on a Windows machine and go down here to Preferences. Now, on a Mac, you're going to see that it's all in one spot, basically. But I wanted to show you on Windows, Utilities for Content Update and Easy Install, and Edit to get to your preferences or settings for the program. That's what you have to do. Last, on a Windows machine, anytime you want to minimize or close out a window, you'll find them on the right upper side of a window. Whereas on a Mac, you're going to find that these are on the left side of the window. That's all I wanted to show you on the Windows machine for now. Now let's get back to the workshop.
Okay. Get back down here. Okay, here we go. So now what I wanted to do is I wanted to install the Heritage of Faith collection on a computer that had never had it before, never had Accordance before, to show you what you might encounter and how to navigate and how to set up your Accordance fairly quickly. So on mine, for some reason, when I first launched the program, it came up with a Portuguese translation. Well, I don't speak Portuguese. I wish I did, but I don't. So in order to get that so that it goes to a regular English translation that I would probably use, I'm going to look through here, and I see that one of the translations I have here is the ESV, and that's the one I'm going to set as my default. So to first thing to do, to get this to always come up with an English translation, I'm going to just simply change this from the Portuguese down to ESV, and now it's at the ESV. And guess what? Because Accordance knows that once I close the program and reopen it, it's going to say, oh, you were in the ESV. I'm going to close Accordance and quit Accordance, I should say. And then, come on. I'm going to reopen it. Sure, I'm going to reopen it. Why can't I get down to my icons? There they are. Okay, I'm going to reopen Accordance. And now you can see that it's at the ESV. So in case you started the program and it was in some other language, find the English translation you want, put it in that window. And to do that, I just simply chose it from within here. And then I restarted the program and I was back to my English translation. Now let's take a look at the toolbar here briefly, and we'll take a look at the library. So on a Mac, your toolbar has icons set up just like it did on the Windows machine. And to customize it, you can right click, you can add text onto it, just like we did. Right now I have the text on there. I can have just the icons. If I go back to text and icon, if I right click, I can customize it. And on this one, it's a little easier. I don't use tabs, so I'm going to just drag that off of there and just have my Bible, daily reading, analytics. I have instant details, highlights. I'm not going to use stacks. You might, there are videos on how to use stacks. I'm not going to use that. I use notes. I don't use amplification. I'm going to take that off. Tutorials is sort of interesting. Tutorials has step-by-step instructions on 100 ways of using accordance, from very basic beginning to a very advanced, for doing searches to doing very complex word studies. So I'll show you that in just a bit. And then you have a built-in help, and you have a global search. So let's see if there's anything else within here that I might want to add up above. I don't see, I have highlighting. I guess there's really, maybe I could, I got dark mode up there. Oh, I'm going to add my web browser. I use my web browser a lot. So I'm going to add my web browser up here. And I just simply click on it and drag it up to the top. And again, in case you mess something up, you can just go back and highlight and bring up the default and bring it right up to the top, and it'll set everything back to the default. I'm going to click done. And so there I've customized a bit of my toolbar. Now on the library, what we're going to want to do is right now I'm showing you my library. I'm going to expand this out. I'm going to clear this. Again, here's, you're going to see not only Bibles in here, but you're going to see things like Perseus. You're going to see Apostolic Fathers. Well, why are they in here with the texts? Because these works were divided up just like a Bible into a book, chapter, and verse. So like if I'm in a Bible and I want to go to a particular book, I click on the table of content. I can say I want Daniel, I want chapter 1, and I want verse 13, and I go right to that particular place. So that's how you can navigate by book, chapter, and verse. The same thing is true for something like the Apostolic Fathers, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. But again, they are set up by book, chapter, and verse. That's why they are found underneath the text version within accordance. But you see here, sort of like I've got all these things. How do I make sense of it? Well, what I do, the first thing I do is I go through here and I say, what translations are the most important to me to use? Well, I wanted to use ESV. So I want to move that to the top of my list. So to do that, I click on it, I hold my left mouse button down, and I drag it to the top till I see an arrow, or to see a line under there, and I drop it off, and there it is. And then I come down here and I say, you know what, I want King James next. So I highlight the King James and I drag it up and I drop it off. So you can organize any window by your favorite books. Now I have a lot of different types of things here, like foreign languages. So maybe I don't want to use them right off the bat. Within Accordance, you can right click and you can add a folder, and I can call it, I can make a foreign one. And then I can start adding into it my foreign Bibles. And I just drag it in there, and then they are in there. And so that's all you have to do. You can just simply go through and arrange your books any way you want. And then you can set that up. And that's sort of helpful because there is a thing that allows you to cycle through a window. So if you have your favorite Bibles there and you're looking at a verse, you can cycle first, you look at the ESV, then cycle to the King James, and then whatever ones would be in the order that you have here. The other thing that I might want to do at some point is create a folder, and in that folder I would put my Apostolic Fathers along with Perseus collections, and we'll talk about that. But all that to say is you can organize your library by dragging your books in and out however you want to place them in that particular category. And sometimes it gets to be a little bit too cluttered for these things, so I might just highlight a bunch of them and move them around, and so you get the idea. So right now I have these as my top translations and works, and again, you can organize them. The same thing is true for dictionaries. In dictionaries, I probably would check out the bigger dictionaries and have them as my favorite. For instance, the ISBE is a 5-volume encyclopedia set done in 1915. It covers 9,600 topics in the Bible. It's probably the most robust encyclopedia for covering information. Even though it's older, it covers a lot of great information. And then I might put underneath that Easton's, which is a good standby, and then Smith's and so forth. So you want to set up your commentaries, and then you just go through and you do the same thing. I have Adam Clark, I put Jamieson Fausset Brown, I put the People's New Testament commentary. So go through, and you're going to want to get to know the books in your Bible and what they do for you, but you're going to want to set up your commentaries in a way that makes sense. Now, down below, we're going to see this other thing here. It's called parallels. And on this, I want to draw your attention to. It's not really a book, but it's a built-in database within the Accordance program. And what that allows me to do, it gives me multiple options. I can look at New Testament epistle parallels, and it will show me information about, from the different books. We're not ashamed, the way of unbelief in Romans and Ephesians. And so it shows me parallels within the New Testament. Synoptic parallels, a harmony of the gospel parallels. And so there's a lot of things that you can do. What books it's found, and then if it's in all 4, it will show you all of them. Old Testament parallels. So anyway, all that to say, these are databases. They're very helpful to have just to compare texts that are repeated or alluded to from the Old Testament to the New Testament, or found in each of the Gospels, or are found throughout the New Testament that are very similar. So these parallels are something I wanted to draw your attention to. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is under Other Book, there's a thing called Getting Started with Accordance. And if you click on that, it basically takes you through getting started with Accordance. It has videos on how to set up your workspaces, your zones, what each of the things are for within the Accordance framework, and how to navigate. So it has videos and step-by-step instructions on that. And remember, the tutorial up here also has step-by-step. Look at all of the different things on doing a step-by-step. So if I wanted to do searching for words, it will say, okay, this is what you do to begin. And it'll take you through a 20-step thing on how to do a search. So just keep in mind that you have the tutorials, you have the book down here at the bottom, Getting Started with Accordance, and you also have context-sensitive help. So many ways of getting help while you're within the program and you don't have to be online for. However, we also have at the website of Accordance, they have all sorts of videos on all types of things of how to use Accordance. So just be aware of that as well. Okay, so we've sort of gone through a little bit on setting up your toolbar and why it's important in your library to organize your books by your favorites at the top. Just like a cream, cream rises to the top. The best rises to the top. So I always put my favorite works always on the top of the categories. So keep that in mind, and especially when you're working with text, so you know right where they're at. This will show you where everything that you've opened recently, in case you wanted to get back to it, but I'm going to clear that for now. And we're right back to our library and our different categories. The next thing that I want to quickly look at is preferences. So this, again, we just started it up. I have redone my toolbar just a bit. I have organized my library a bit. And so now I want to go, and I want to go on a Mac. You don't go to preferences, you go to settings under accordance. And so I'm going to go to settings, and you're going to get the same dialog box that Windows has. And we're going to take a look, and I'm just going to go through a few of these. You might want to come back to the video later, and basically if you want to emulate or copy it, you can, and just sort of see what I did. But I'm going to take a look at a few of these things. So first, general. I choose last session, that's fine. I suppress everything. I like to get right into the program. I don't want to go to, different tips or hints and stuff like that. The only other thing I do here is it says change resources and navigate. And so that means that I can go through my dictionaries on a topic and just cycle through them. So you might have move insertion. I always select change resources and navigate. Now, when you're setting your settings and preferences in accordance, you don't have to hit OK and then reopen it. You can just go through and make any changes you want all at once, and then when you hit OK, they all get applied. So let's take a look at Amplify. So Amplify, I chose the ISBE because, again, it is the most, it's 9,600 topics, so it'll give me probably the best information on a topic if I'm looking at something within the scriptures or in a book. These should be already set. A verse reference is usually a commentary. It doesn't have to be a commentary. It could be something like a treasure of scripture knowledge, and that's fine too. And we're just going to leave everything else here the way it is. So the only thing I want to make sure is that I have a really good English work and a good reference. That's something that's I know that has good cross references in it. Then appearance. Normally this might be check marked. I like to uncheck it. I'm glad they've made it a default to keep it unchecked, because I like to have as much space to work with and as possible. Font size, I'm going to change mine to medium large, and same with this. I'm going to go medium, and you can change different things. Auto scrolling is for the ability to have the program auto scroll when you're in a Bible. So it's like hands-free driving. You can turn on a Bible and it will scroll for you as you read, and you can just focus on reading the scriptures and not have to focus on hitting, clicking on the down arrow or something to move the screen. The next thing I'm going to look at is workspaces. I like them to be unlimited. You may or may not want to have instant details to a new workspace. For now, I'm going to leave that on. Text display, this is something I like to do. Right now I have it in paragraphs, but you can also do it so that it's just verses with space, or you can have just separated by verse, and you can choose the size. And so that, for this presentation, I'm going to just have the size to be 21. I'm going to have it be a bigger font. And this is the space between. Now, I don't need 60, but I choose 35 because if you're going to be doing highlighting or putting symbols underneath the text, 35 seems to be a pretty good percentage to put, like a crown under God, or a rainbow under heavens. Concordance allows you to not only highlight, but to put symbols underneath particular words. And then you can choose the font you want. So I'm going to choose something maybe a little differently. Let's go down here and choose, go to the T's, and I'm going to go to Times New Romans. Why not? And so, right now I have the color background as white. Tool display. This is where your dictionaries, commentaries, and stuff come in. I don't need 60. Really, all I need on this one is probably 20. So I'm going to hit that at 20, and I'll leave that at that. I'm going to make that 21 too. I'm old. I need to be able to read. And I want it to be a different color background than my Bible text. So I'm going to choose something like, let's go book parchment. So it's a little bit different, a little bit darker. The next thing I'm going to go down to is instant details. I turn them, they're all on. That's good. And you'll see why that's good. There's one that wasn't checked on. And I'm going to say font size, I'm going to go medium large on that. So you're going to see how that works. Citations, this is where you can choose how you want things to look. But really, if you're a student and you want to have footnoting brought in with anything that you copy and paste into your word processor, you can bring it in with footnoting. You would choose bibliography. Right now it's set for SBL, but I'm going to choose Chicago, or let's do Turabian footnotes. That'd be fine. And I think, oh yeah, the reading and research, what I have here is you have the ability to show results in full text, which I like. You can show the hits in the browser, which also I like. And I don't want to, and I think I don't want to buy importance, although that's good for me because I put all of my favorite books at the top. I want to always be able to see at the top of the results my favorite books. So I'm going to choose on library order. That way, when my dictionaries open up within a search, it'll be Isby first, Easton's next, Smith next, and so forth. So I have search all, library will be first, show results in full text, show hits in browser. Now you can turn this off and on because you can easily, once it gives you a result, open it up into a full, its own book. But we're going to take a look and see what that looks like. I guess the only other, that's all I'm going to do for now. And so after you get it set up all, well, let's see, there's one other thing I wanted. Yeah, my search tabs. I like to make sure that my analytics has everything that I'm looking for when I do a search. So go to search tab, makes it, everything is checked off. Now when I click on OK, my font sizes will take place. My colors that I chose for the backgrounds will be there. The spacing between the lines will be there. So I click on OK, I say apply, apply. And now when I open up my ESV, you're going to see that there it is. It's in the Times Romans because that's what I used. And it's probably at an 18 font. And of course, within the program, you have A's. You can make the font bigger on the fly in case you need to. Now, so that's a little bit about preferences. Now, the other thing that, let's go back here to Genesis. Let's start right from the very beginning. So let me show you a couple things that we're looking at here on the screen. The first thing that I want to show you is this window over here is called an info pane. And that's this button right here. You can turn that on, or you can turn it off, and you can turn it on. I think by default, I have it turned on. The info pane gives you a couple of different items. You'll notice that Adam Clark is here, and then Jamison Fawcett Brown. Why is it in that order? Because in my commentaries, Adam Clark is first, Jamison Fawcett Brown is third, or second. Now, if I go to the New Testament, it will appear, another commentary will appear, because that's a New Testament commentary. So if I go to John chapter 1:1, People's New Testament, I thought should appear, but it's not appearing. Huh. Well, okay. Anyway, let's go back here to Genesis. Now, another thing I want to show you is the instant detail window. And this, it serves so many different functions. So when you have that turned on, and you can adjust it, and I'm going to hide my library for a second. If you're pointing to a word, it's going to, down below, it's going to show you the Strong's number, the Hebrew, and then the pronunciation of that word. So any word you go to, I'm going to hold my shift key down so I can get down here and show you what that is. If there's a subscript or superscript in it, it gives you the cross references for that. So any work that has anything in it that's a superscript, subscript, or a link, your instant detail will show you information on that. So over here underneath my commentaries, I have Adam Clark, and I can see that I just have to point to it, and it tells me what it's saying about that verse. I can point to Jamison Fawcett Brown. It also has built-in cross references that automatically go with what verse, chapter 1 through, well, just really verse 1. And it has topics that we can look at from the ISB. And so if I go down to whatever verse I go to, this stays very quickly in line with whatever verse that I'm looking at. So that's something that to keep in mind. That's what an info pane does. It gives you as much information on that verse without you having to look it up. Now, if I click on the work, it actually opens up in the book, and then it will stay synchronized with that. So I could open up Adam Clarke as well. Oh, I have it recycled. So anyway, you can keep everything open and go side by side. By the way, notice how the background color is a little differently in Adam Clarke because I chose book parchment instead. So you can also take that off. You can also add what are called parallels. So if I want to have another translation there, I can go in here, I can go to my text, and I can add the King James. And I can move that around by dragging it in wherever I want to put it. I can put it side by side so everything all stays together as I'm studying. I can make that font bigger. So everything will stay synchronized as I'm scrolling through my materials. So info pane, add parallels, that's something. The other thing that people forget about is that within the program, you also have the ability, even in this Heritage of Faith collection, the King James or the ESV, you can actually turn on a regular interlinear where you actually have the Hebrew words and the Strong's number, and so you can actually have a sort of a built-in little interlinear, which I think is pretty cool, whether it's in Hebrew or in Greek. So if you're in the New Testament, it's Greek. If you're in the Hebrew Bible, it's going to be Hebrew. So you have that Hebrew, and you can also customize it so it shows words. It doesn't show words. It shows transliterations if there's anything to be seen there. I don't think it has a gloss either because that's all something you have to add. But you can play along with that, and then you can hide the interlinear anytime you want. Okay, so let's get back, and now let's take a look at some of the things in the library. As I mentioned before, this library has, it's called the Heritage of Faith, and it goes back to the Apostolic Fathers. And then the Apostolic Fathers were those that were either discipled underneath the apostles or, right within that same vicinity. Then they discipled others and they became the church fathers, and we go all the way up to really about 700 AD with church fathers. But then we have, on top of that, after we have the Apostolic Fathers, the church fathers, we have just a bunch of writings, selected works by different people. And I'm going to call the Apostolic Fathers, the church fathers, and all of these wonderful works influencers. They all influenced Christianity. They all influenced coming and dealing with the truth. Well, how do we get to the truth? What do we know? How do we know it? Why do we know it? Can we document it? And what about our faith? And so these were all influencers to the Christian faith that we have today. So with that, as you can see, there's a lot of good works here. And my favorites are going to be the church fathers, and you're going to see a little bit why in just a second. But I'm going to close out the ESV right now, and we're going to take a look at some of the books within the library. So first, I'm going to go to the dictionaries. I'm going to open up the ISBE. So in our classes, sometimes you want to study like a book of the Bible. You want to know the background to a book of the Bible. So all I have to do is just go to my table of content, and I type in like Genesis. And we find all sorts of places where Genesis is talked about. But of course, if we get down to the G's, then we have the actual topic of Genesis, and it gives us the name, a survey of the contents, connects with succeeding books, the composition, and so forth. So any book that I wanted to do a study on, I can use the dictionary. And one thing that's good about dictionaries, they don't try to be biased in a certain way. They're just there to give you facts. So sometimes a dictionary is just, like I said, it's not trying to lean in one direction or another, just giving you facts. So if I wanted to look at John, I can go to John. Of course, I'm going to find John the Baptist, the death of John. I go down through here, and then all of a sudden I get to the Apostle John, and then the Gospel of John, and it gives me the introduction and so forth. So I can do that with the Easton's Dictionary as well. I can go here and I can type in Genesis. And so I can go through Old Testament, New Testament, and I get this information. So dictionaries give you information, not only, things of like people, places, things. Like I could go back here and I say, I want information on Moses, and I get all this information throughout I get all this information from all these places on Moses, without having to get out 5 volumes and read through them and highlight them. It's right there for me instantly, which I think is really, really helpful. And so any kind of a topic you want to look at, you can look at Sabbath. And it's ABB, there we go. Okay. And so you can look at all sorts of things that deal with Sabbath and so forth, the origins of the Sabbath and so forth. So there's all types of things that you can do with the table of contents just by typing something in and then finding it instantly within the table of contents. So that's one thing you can do on that. Now, the other thing you can do is, let's go to commentaries. Let's look at Jamieson Fausset Brown. So here I have the book of Job and its introduction. And again, what I found with this one, which I thought was interesting, it gives me information like here's an introduction to the Pentateuch and historical books, introduction to the poetical books, an introduction to the prophetical books, and then to the prophets of the restoration. It doesn't give me introductions on any of the law books or the historical books. It's not until I get to the poetic books that I get introductions. But even at that, it's still very helpful to be able to get an introduction from there. Jamin and Adam Clarke does for something very similar. What they do or what Adam Clarke does is, if I'm in a book, it says chapter 1, but chapter 1 is really the introduction before it actually gets into the actual commentary. Now, Adam Clarke is a little older, and he was more in line with, timelines and things than sometimes the information found within the book, but it's still very, very helpful to have. So that's how that works. People's New Testament commentary is good for New Testament. It does do introductions. Robertson's and Vincent's word studies give you word studies in the New Testament, which are helpful. I'm going to go down here under theological works. Let's take a look at a couple of them. One thing I wanted to say about this program is it was sort of created because I wanted something that helped people to start to think back again critically. How do we think critically? How do we come to understand reason and logic? And what is the method for that? Where did that come from? What is the best ways to handle debate on finding evidence and providing the reason for our beliefs in a way that people understand and that we can refute things that are wrong? How do we do that? And so some of the ways that you do that is by studying some of these great works. So Aquinas, he starts off with, like, he has all these different things about questions. He starts off with questions like the place and purpose within proper limits, talking about the nature and extent of sacred doctrine. And he has these questions, and then he has objections that people raise philosophically, and then he answers that, and then objections, and then he answers that. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for, is what are the questions that we need to ask? What are the questions that people might ask, and how do we come to a reasonable reason and logic to handle that in a succinct way that makes sense? And so reading some of these works really help you with a lot of those different kinds of things. The creeds are really good. The creeds are some of the things that people had to do that have questions in them, and from whence, that people, the catechisms and things, not necessarily Catholic, but the creeds and stuff, as you research it, thing that seems interesting to me is that there'd be 101 different questions for the catechisms that just Protestant evangelical kids had to learn and recite. And a lot of them had them all memorized, by the time they were 4 or 5 years of age. Can you imagine that? Having over 100 creeds, things about why I believe in God, the Father Almighty, who Jesus Christ was, why did God create us? And they had the questions and they had the answers memorized at a very, very young age. And so these creeds are really pretty interesting to work with as well. The other thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is cross-reference. Well, yeah, let's get down here first. So now we're going to get down to biblical studies, and I'm going to show you a couple other things within biblical studies that are good. One thing that's very helpful for getting a good overview of the books of the Bible is a good outline. And so this gives me a good outline, and also you can use it if you want to memorize the books of the Bible in the order that we typically use them. Now there's a chronological order too, and there's different types of orders that we can choose from, but this is sort of the evangelical order. But if I go to Genesis, I get a good outline from Genesis. I can see what are the highlighted items. And a lot of times people say they just take me up through Genesis is about God creating the heavens and the earth, that man sins, and that there's a flood, and that's it. But you see, the flood happens in chapter 10, and then all of a sudden we have a generation, a nation for God, and it goes on for 40 chapters. So only up to the flood is only 1/5. Is that right? 1/5 of the book. So if you're going to look at the whole book, you got to look at the whole book. And this gives you a good outline, gives you a really good overview of each of the books of the Bible here. Another way to look at the books of the Bible would be, I'm going to go to cross references, and there's a thing called the ESV notes. And the ESV notes gives me an introduction to each book, again, which is very helpful, and then section headings. And so that gives me sort of the highlights of the book. And then I get to the next book down, and it's going to go to, gives me notes on Genesis, but if I go down here to, let's go to Thessalonians. See, you get your introduction, you get your section headings. So don't forget about the ESV notes, because those are very, very helpful to use as well. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, since I've already decided that I like the dictionaries and I like some of those commentaries, I went through here and I said, you know what, I wanted to add some of these things to my favorite folder, because if I wanted to do a search, I don't maybe necessarily going to search through everything, but I'm going to search through my favorites folder. So to create a folder, you right click on a work, and then you can say, not a folder, I'm going to use it as user group. And you can create a new user group, but I've already created one called favorites, and I'm going to click on that. And to find it, it's going to be down here. You're going to see where you're going to see my groups, and you're going to see that I have favorites. I've already put into it the ISB, Jamison, Foster, Brown, the ESV notes, outlines of Bible books, and now I just added Berkhoff's New Testament introduction. So you can add whatever books you want into that, and then when you're doing a search for something, it's going to be one of the categories that you can say, I want to search just through my favorite books, and you can do that very quickly. Now, the last thing that I want to take a look at quickly within the resources are the Apostolic Fathers, and again, the early church fathers. One thing that I did within Accordance is I created a user tool, and within that user tool, I created a thing called Apostolic and Church Fathers. And so what I'm going to have Linda do, or what we can do, is I can send you this file, and it will come to you. And when you get it in your email, all you do is double click on it, and it will automatically install itself into Accordance. So my question was, why study the Apostolic and early church fathers? And then what I have here are different websites that talk about why you should study the early church fathers and how important they are as influencers to what we have today. And then, so I have the Apostolic Fathers, and then I have the Church Fathers, and then from there, I have Greek philosophy. why the influence of Greek philosophy for understanding reason, logic, and debate, critical thinking. So I have this, and you can just jump to any one of these things and it'll open right up within Accordance. And so I know that I'm going to do a workshop sometime in the future on how to create user tools, because they're very easy to do. They're very powerful. You can share them with other people. Anything that you're finding on the internet, you can bring into a window. For instance, this stuff here, I said, ask Google, why do we study with the Apostolic Fathers? And it gave me this paragraph along with key reasons why we study them. And so I put them, I just highlighted it, dragged them into here. Once you open it, you can open up this window here, and it's an editing window. You can edit whatever you want, and then you can update it. And once you update it, it updates it into what you see before you. And so anyways, I had studying the early church fathers. I asked Google that. What is the difference between apostolic and church fathers? So anyways, I have this little document. It's called a user tool. I'll be glad to share that with you, because I think it's beneficial for people, and I know I'm talking very, very fast. I think it's beneficial for people to understand the importance of looking at those that influenced us as Christians and what we have today in the church. So with that, let me go to one other thing. I also created a user tool that I call web browser favorite links. And so within here, I cover a variety of things that you can open up within the web browser within Accordance, from preaching to biblical studies to ministries and institutes, all there right before your very eyes, and you can open them up and use them right within the program. So I'll be glad to share both user tools with anybody that wants them. They're just a little freebie thing that you can add in, and I think they are sort of fun to play with. Let's take a look now, though, briefly at the early church fathers. Well, yeah. So I'm going to go up to text, though, and remember we had the apostolic fathers, and then we had this thing called Perseus. And now I want to show you Perseus. I think we did 9 volumes of that. Perseus are collections of works, and they really cover Aristotle, they cover Plato, they cover Socrates. And so when I was in college, I had to read Plato, the Republic. And so even though this isn't Christian, I understand that, it's good to see where logic comes from, how the Greeks influenced us today, and why it was so important that, and to my opinion, that the New Testament was written in Greek, because of all the nuances that the Greek contains in trying to explain the revelation of God and the mysteries of Christ and what he's done for us as people and in salvation. And so you can go to anything that you want to look at, and here's the Republic. So I can look at part 1 of the Republic, and now I have the Republic, and I can take a look at who he names. He talks about Socrates, and you can go through here and you can read stuff. And if I'm in, I can go and I can open them up. So again, Perseus gives you a lot of the top Greek philosophers during that time. And then the early church fathers, they will, let me just show you what they can do. Now, they're not arranged by book, chapter, and verse. If I want to know where a book is at, I can just start typing it up here, and then I can right click here, and I can say show in library, so I can see where they're at. They're underneath the writings. But let's just take a look at the church fathers and see what we have. Again, they dealt with logic and reason. Introduction, the purpose of a book to vindicate the Christian doctrine, and it goes through these different things that you can look at. And you can look at the table of contents, and you can see who's there. One thing Athanasius does a beautiful job on is on the crucifixion. It is one of the most delightful things, and how he approaches it. Why did it have to be public? Why did it have to be at the hands of the Romans? Why? And then he answers them. He answers them. He answers them. So he raises the question that a person might have, and then he answers it. It's phenomenal to read through and to see what they do. But when you have a church fathers book open, this is what I like about the table of contents game. I can go through here and I can type in something like faith, and I can see all the different places that these different church fathers discussed faith or the incarnation or philosophy or reason or logic. All you do is you just go up here and you type in the word. So I want to see about reason. And I can go the reason why under Constantine, further concerning the disputes council and so forth. So with the early church fathers using the table of contents, you can just focus in on one particular topic and study that all the way through the early church fathers from each of the works. So right now I'm in volume 2, but I could go down here to the Ante-Nicene and do the same thing and see what they said about faith and just go through it. So a lot of people know Clement, a lot of people know Athanasius. So, you know, they're making a comeback. People are really starting to discover a lot of the things that they wrote. They tie us with the historical background, critical thinking to the New Testament. Now, you may not agree with everything that they have to say, but it's interesting to see what they do say and how it does tie us in to where they were coming from and why the scriptures were so important to them as well. So the early church fathers are really, really, really one of my favorites. I'm glad that the Accordance program allowed that to be put in to it. Biblical training is a wonderful thing. It's with Dr. Mounts. Then you also have things like parables and miracles. It has all the parables of Jesus, all the miracles of Jesus. So again, there's a lot of materials within this package that's totally free that you can get a lot of use out of, that I really recommend that people take time and look at and use. So I think that's where I'm gonna stop right now. I'm going to stop the recording.